Well, thank you very much for coming here today. As one of the city employees in neighborhood services, which Josh and Eric and Delaney and myself all work for, we appreciate your reaching out and trying to acquire this knowledge. Knowledge is power, and makes us all better people. My name is Dale Wood. I am the Occupancy Investigator for the City of Fort Collins. Is anybody not familiar with our occupancy ordinance that we have? That's a good thing. It's not a popular ordinance across the country, but we are not the only municipality that enforces occupancy regulations. And again, that's all I do for the city. There's one ordinance that pertains to occupancy, and the city and you, as taxpayers, pay me to enforce. I'm sorry, is that better? Okay. The city pays me to enforce just one ordinance, and that's it. There's 3,500 statutes in the state of Colorado. The city of Fort Collins pays me to enforce one ordinance. That's how important our city council thinks this is. I've been in law enforcement for 37 years. I'm a retired police chief from Southwest Colorado. That's probably why I got this job, because of my background in investigations. And we've been fairly successful in that. Again, the occupancy ordinance is not new. It was originally drafted by the then City Council in 1964 as a criminal ordinance. And the difference between what it is now, a civil infraction, and a criminal ordinance, we all watch the cop shows on TV. A criminal violation carries a burden of proof of beyond a reasonable doubt. We've all heard that. The burden of proof related to that is 90% chance this person did this crime. A civil infraction, the burden of proof is reference the preponderance of the evidence, more likely than not. So the burden of proof is brought down to 51 versus 49%. A lot more easy to prove. Along with that, the fine with the civil infraction is significant, and we'll cover that a little bit later. There's no possibility of jail time for a civil infraction like there is with a criminal. So in 2007, City Council rewrote this ordinance to make it a civil infraction, bring the burden of proof down, bring the fine up, take jail, because it's ridiculous to think somebody's going to go to jail for violating the occupancy ordinance. Henceforth, I'm sure it was never enforced back from 64 to 2007 when the new look of it took place. So the fine is $1,000 a day for violation of this ordinance. And that's not just a simple, okay, violate the ordinance, you're going to get hit with $1,000. That's for every person that is associated with it. So if we have more than 3 in a property, and that's what the ordinance says, and we're going to cover that shortly. If you have more than 3 in a property, each occupant potentially could be subjected to $1,000 a day. A property management company, if there is one, could be subjected to the $1,000 a day. And the owners, you individuals here, could get that fine as well. So if we have 5 occupants in a house that's managed by a property management company that's owned by you, quick math in my head says probably about $7,000 a day. And as we get near the end of this slideshow, you'll see that the city is willing to levy those fines when we need to. We don't want to, but we will if we need to. So this is our annual caseload. Lots of people think that we don't do anything. The ordinance, again, as a civil infraction, enforcement started in 2007, and you can see the numbers there. We now historically hover somewhere around 150 complaints a year, and right now we investigate by complaint only, except for one small subdivision on the western side of the city that we reference as Avery Park. It's where Avery Park is at. Does anybody have any rentals in Avery Park? Okay. We do proactive enforcement in that one neighborhood, and the reason is it's a 1/2 by 1 square mile area, and they account for 23% of our caseload. So we have a pretty significant presence over there. Okay, the question is, do Do we deal more with the occupants, the tenants that would be in violation, or landlord owners that have more than the 3 in the property? And I've never run the numbers, but I know anecdotally that the vast majority of the complaints that we investigate that are in violation is a result of the tenants moving more people in, the vast majority, probably 80+%. And my job is to determine who in fact is culpable. So if we have to level those fines, we want to make sure that we're finding the right person. So my job is to determine how the situation came to be and who's ultimately responsible. The ordinance makes you responsible, and we'll cover that in just a minute. The slide that's up there now, these are the 2 acronyms that float around the city that refer to this ordinance. U+2 and 3 unrelated. Yeah, I'm sure everybody's heard those terms. And to put it into perspective, this is in the media almost all the time. Because of the polarizing nature of the ordinance, you're either for it or you're against it. Very few people are middle of the road. So it's in front of city council on a regular basis. So, the Associated Students of CSU recently were trying to lobby to get this ordinance on the ballot to change it to what they were calling Me+3 to allow for. That initiative they tried to push through kind of died on the vine, so I don't think anything's going to happen there. But neither of these 2 acronyms accurately describe what the ordinance really is. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to cover it right now. Okay, so what the ordinance actually says, there's 2 sections to the occupancy ordinance, which is 3.8.16 of the Fort Collins Land Use Code. The first section says a family of any size or makeup plus 1 individual can occupy a house. That's pretty simple, family plus 1. The second section of the ordinance is where it gets confusing, and this is where that 3 unrelated or U+2 would come into play. What it says is 1 adult, their dependents, the second adult, their dependents can have 1 additional person. So when we're talking about students, we generally have 3 or more students in a house. You just take the dependent equation out of play. So you have 1 adult, a second adult can have 1 additional person. That's where it comes up to 3. Does that make sense? It's the easiest way to remember this. Don't refer to the U+2 or 3 unrelated. We get questions weekly of, well, we have 4 in here, but 2 of them are brothers, so 3 are unrelated. That's not how the equation works. So if you just remember what the actual ordinance says, 2 adults and their dependents is what the slide says. So you got 2 adults, their dependents, and not more than 1 additional person. And the way that was written is to keep a family situation together, a blended family. A boyfriend with dependents, girlfriend with dependents, they can still have 1 additional person. So this is the answer to your question, that last bullet point there, that a person knew or reasonably should have known through diligence of their own. And what that means is there's an expectation from the city that you're going to do more than collect the rent on your properties, that occasionally go by and see what's going on at the house, whether you schedule your routine maintenance walkthroughs or drive by after hours when people get home and count cars. And sometimes when we get a complaint, that's where we start. We go by early morning hours when we know people are still at home before they scatter for the day, and we start seeing how many vehicles are there, and then I start figuring out who's in possession of the vehicle and determine who in fact is in the house. And then if the number is more than 3, then we violate the house, or if it's a family, if there's more than 1 additional person. So through reasonable diligence, and you all can figure out what that means, because I can't tell you, but if I was a property owner, I would routinely drive by the property and see what's going on. It doesn't take much for Eric and I to drive around and start picking out overoccupied houses. Okay, the next slide, this is the definition that the city uses for family. And you can see that it's pretty broad, pretty wide open, that if there's a declaration of family during the investigation, we look into it and determine if that's the case. And we have access to some pretty elaborate databases that we can go to the fourth degree of relationship. So if somebody tells us John Doe is related to James Anderson, it doesn't take us long through these databases to affirm or not affirm if that's the case. This is the definition of occupancy that the city uses. And the one that concerns most is that Section C would be the guest component. Without getting too far off track, there's no regulation for the first 30 days of occupancy of a house. So to be a violator of this ordinance would be basically on the 31st day. And we run into this routinely with the university when we have more than 3 students in a house. So it can't be a violation for 30 days. And on that 31st day, that's why in middle of September every year, our numbers spike just unbelievably from middle of August when school gets back into session. By middle of September, Eric and I have our hands full. This is the city's occupancy disclosure statement that by ordinance you're required to execute at the time of lease. Is everybody familiar with this? I don't think you have a copy in your notebooks. It's only the little one on the slides here. So I brought some copies here so everybody has them. So this document that is to be executed with the 3 tenants and kept with your lease. The city doesn't want it, only if we request it over the course of an investigation. And again, we do that about 150 times a year. This tells us that you told your tenants they couldn't over-occupy. So to further answer your question, with this document executed, your tenants are affirming they understand the ordinance, that they cannot over-occupy. Doesn't stop them from doing it. There's probably 5,000 over-occupied properties in the city right now. But we're again, complaint-driven. Good question. You'll see notary blocks on there. The answer is no, it does not need to be notarized. We ask that you use some form of electronic date stamping, scanning it, emailing it to yourself, anything that will get an electronic date stamp on there. The notary block is if there are no other alternatives to do, but we see very few that are notarized. The extra occupancy rental homes, we do not. Eric, remind me, we're running into this more and more. There's 48 of those properties in the city, single-family dwelling units, 48 extra occupancy rental homes that are allowed by certificate of occupancy to allow more than 3. So we need to amend that so that's available. Thank you for that question, but that's the only form we have right now. So I know it's awkward to try and get the more. We've got one extra occupancy house that allows 9, is permitted for 9. So my presumption is they're executing 3 of those. We've never had a complaint on the property. So it is available online, and there's copies here. This is the ordinance pertaining to the disclosure statement, and the ordinance requires this document to be executed regardless if you got it bulleted or paragraphed in your lease. We encourage it to be in both places, but we all know, particularly when we have 18, 19-year-old students that are leaving campus for the first time, all they want to do is sign the papers and get moved in. And just like the lead-based paint disclosure, this has to be a standalone document on the city format. So it's got the city logo across the top. So if you want a bullet point in your lease, that's fine, but we also need the standalone. So real quick, people ask us how we know if a property is over occupied. There are 8 vehicles and 2 trailers in front of this house. Coincidentally, this house was 4 houses down from where I used to live. I don't live there anymore. And my wife, who used to work for the city and go to work with me, we drive by this house every day. And every day she'd say, investigate this. It's overoccupied. And I tell her, you don't get a complaint. You know, you're cheating the system, so I'm not going to do that. So this picture, I took this photograph on a Saturday, again, because I live right down the street. And I decided that I was going to notify the property management company that it's clearly overoccupied. I'm going to get the complaint, do something about it. So that was Saturday when I took this picture, which was back in 2011. Monday, when I came to work, I called the property management. Well, let me back up. I did call the property management company at 1 in the afternoon. I got the complaint on this about 9 that morning, the Monday after I took this picture. So then when I called the property management company, it wasn't a, you know, hey, you might want to do this before I got the complaint. It was, hey, I got the complaint, do something about it. And my wife was not the complainant. I was I was worried about that, but she was not. This picture is from a single-family home, actually in Avery Park, the place we were just talking about. 3 students cannot generate 3 poly carts worth of trash plus a singular trash can that you'll see behind there. That was 1 week's worth of trash. Again, just another clue that there's probably more than 3 in there. This was on an open mailbox. We see this fairly often. If you can have 3 in the property, why is 5 receiving mail there? And we don't open mailboxes. That would be a federal offense for us to do that. But lots of occupants they don't shut their lids, and this was seen from public view. I walked up to talk to the individuals at the door, and I don't even think the discussion occurred. I saw the names who was there, went back, did the data search on it, and confirmed that those 5 individuals in fact existed, and we violated the property. This next photograph was taken a day after the occupants received a violation notice. And I just have, yet again, another one in Avery Park. And I was over there on checking out another property, and just happened to go by and trying to move one of the females out of the property the day after they got the violation notice. We appreciate the due diligence of coming into compliance, but it's better just not to violate in the first place. This is property on the west end of the city. There are 7 citations attached to this property. We called this the Tuna Circle 7 just because of the name of the street the property was on. But there were 7 individuals in this property, and all 7 were cited. Not the owners, but the 7 occupants were cited. This is a slide of an actual citation that we issued. And I think you can make it out there. My old eyes probably couldn't, but I know what it is because I wrote it. The fine that we assessed, and this was in fact to a property owner, a 3-time offender. She didn't get it the first time, she didn't get it the second time, so the 3rd time we hit her up for $38,000. The fine could have been $269,000. But instead of hitting her for $1,000 a day, we hit her for $1,000 a week. There's a formula that we use. What the ordinance says is up to $1,000 a day. And I'm not sure the city council, while they want this ordinance enforced, I don't think they want me to make their budget for them every year, which I could, probably. So in conjunction with the city attorney's office, we have a formula that we use to assess these fines. This fine would not have been this high if she wasn't a 3-time offender. It would have been a third of that amount if she didn't have the history that she did. That being said, she is not reoffended, so I think we got her attention. There was a plea bargain with the city attorney's office. She paid a substantial amount. If she'd have paid this, we know from our investigation we would have bankrupted her, and that the city doesn't want that. We just want compliance. So the attorney's office worked with her. That is correct. She owned the property. Our investigation, it was 269 days. And we'd been watching the property, again, because of the history, that we presumed that she would probably reoffend. We knew she was in violation. We just waited for the complaint to come in, and it did 269 days later. Did everybody hear the question? If you have your own internal suspicions that you have an overoccupied situation, tenants aren't being forthcoming with information, what do you do? And if you live outside the area, do you have anybody in the city that can keep an eye on the property for you? I would recommend to have them do the monthly maintenance walkthrough, or however you do a walkthrough. Again, because the way the ordinance is written, through reasonable diligence on your part, and again, I've got plenty of work to do without, and that being said, if I have a property manager and owner call me and say, that property's in violation, will you investigate it? Yes, we will. But I think you're kind of asking for something just prior to that, of determining if they're in violation. I have one property management company that does this routinely. We'll call and say that they move 4 in on me, violate them. So we do the investigation, we do that. But it's incumbent upon you, however you make that work, to kind of know what's going on. That being said, if I can be of assistance, call me. And my number will be on the last slide here. Yep, we ask the disclosure statement to be executed as close to the time of lease as possible. And if you haven't done it now with tenants, if they're leaving because of the end of the school year, don't worry about it now. But your new tenants coming in August, we ask it that you do that. So the presentation, I'll get with you in just a second here. The presentation right before me was Fair Housing Act, as you recall. I just want everybody to know, because I hear this threat several times a year, that they're going to sue the city of Fort Collins over the occupancy ordinance because it violates the Fair Housing Act. The United States Supreme Court in 1977 ruled that occupancy based upon numbers of persons is not discriminatory. So if somebody's got a fat wallet and they want to challenge this Supreme Court ruling from 77, be my guest, but nobody has, once we explain to them that no, the numbers is not a protected class. By putting too many people in a property, if you're in violation, we have the authority to do that regulation. And the history in Fort Collins, we kind of set the standard nationwide. We get pinged from around the country several times a month of what we do it, how we do it, why are we successful. So I think we've done a pretty good job. And it's not uncommon for college or university-based municipalities to have an occupancy ordinance. There's several in Colorado that do. We do, Boulder does, Greeley does, Wheatridge, handful, but not every municipality. The occupancy ordinance applies to all properties within the city of Fort Collins, not unincorporated Lemmer County, not Loveland. I get asked routinely to investigate in Loveland, but they don't have an occupancy ordinance. Yeah, so any property. Does the Postal Service let us know about violations? Very infrequently. It does happen, but almost never. They just want to deliver the mail and go about their business. Yeah, we appreciate that. Again, this is a polarizing ordinance. Either you're for it or you're against it. There is no middle of the road. And we didn't know what ASCSU was going to be capable of doing, because what I was hearing that there was not a whole lot of support to increase it to 4. And again, that kind of died on the vine. They didn't get the number of signatures on the petition, so I think that's done.